I'm glad to hear that you're getting back into digital painting after a few years away. Your work, I would not have guessed that you're somebody who's taken a long break from art because you did a really great job with this assignment. I would like to hear more about your experience because you say you're struggling with rendering and time management. And I'm a little curious about what you mean by rendering in specific, because it's like the definition of terms here always seems to be an interesting point to explore. Because I remember I had a friend who had never done painting very much, and was trying to figure out what rendering was kind of for the first time. And I have a feeling that like his definition of having trouble with rendering would be very different from what you're saying you're having trouble with rendering. And this is one of the things that I think gets people into trouble when it comes to learning digital art or any kind of art, is that there's a certain amount of imprecision in the terms. So you might think, oh, I'm having trouble with rendering. I'll go look up and I'll ask for advice about rendering. I'll look up information about rendering. And it might not be rendering necessarily. There might be some sort of sub-skill that's more specific that you're ultimately having a difficulty with. And so I wouldn't necessarily try to, I don't know if that's something you're doing, but I wouldn't necessarily try to pinpoint like, hey, I need to specifically do exercises to practice this skill, or I need to go and look up tutorials specifically related to this skill. When it comes to time management, there's only so much you can do. A lot of the time management with painting comes back to an efficiency that's learned through practice. And so if you want to get faster when it comes to these kinds of studies, but like painting in general, I would say just try to make a daily study habit like these. How long did it take you to do this one? Soft versus hard edges, probably around 8 hours. Okay, so doing a piece like this daily is not necessarily an option. 8 hours daily doing studies is not the goal. When I say doing a daily study, I mean more along the lines of spending 1 to 2 hours in a study daily. So that I would say, like, if you did 8 hours over the course of a week, that's about as much study daily as I would recommend. We've got a very odd looking user just popped in. Tried to limit my time. I got carried away. No, you're fine. You spending a week doing one of these per week. If you're going to spend about 8 hours per week doing it, I would say is a good plan. So if you can keep that habit up, I think you're going to be in excellent shape. Soft versus hard edges. I think, yeah, like if the question is about edges, then having some extra mindfulness about whether, like, how you control your edges is, I would say, different from rendering more broadly. Personally, I like using I like using a hard round brush as my primary brush, and you can see that it's got these kind of soft edges to it. So this allows me to soften edges by running, like, having them terminate, having the brush stroke terminate on that side, or carve a hard edge by running it lengthwise across that edge. And so the thing I'm always looking out for when I'm doing rendering is how long of a distance a transition is going to be. So, like, in this case, I'm having this very long gradient running this way. It's running over a fairly long distance. And so when you're looking at, like, a lot of softness going across the forehead, you might be seeing a really long gradient. And then the opposite is carving these very, very hard edges. Finding a tool that you can carve, like, razor hard edges with. But then there's always going to be something that's in between. You're going to have these, like, semi-soft edges like transitioning across a shadow. And there's an infinite number of like levels of softness to an edge that you might want to have. You might just want to like soften it halfway. You might want to like have it like be hard and then get blurry. And so having a brush, a singular rendering brush that will allow you to control the level of hardness and softness that you're achieving on any given edge is, I think, a major part of the whole challenge of learning to paint. So my recommendation is to try to find a tool that allows you to have a great deal of control over your edges without having to like switch back and forth or mess with a lot of settings or fuss with it too much. Because then you're going to be able to build a kind of intuitive sense on, hey, I want to like, firm up a little transition to make a little corner, or I want to soften out some accidental tool marks. Being able to do that with a single tool that you can intuitively use and just sort of be in the zone and push around your edges and firm them up and soften them, making a hard cut that goes into a softer bit. That's something that's possible to do with a single brush in just about any digital painting program, just so long as you find parameters that allow you to achieve that naturally. Some people really like pressure sensitivity to control their opacity to create this kind of result. Personally, I like the size brush rather than the opacity flow one, with the flow turned down to about 30%. And you can see that allows me to control whether or not I'm getting like blending or creating contrast. So my big recommendation for that is like, you already know that you need something. The something is probably a tool that gives you the sense of control, so that you're constantly in the, you're worried about the choice of what kind of edge you're using rather than fighting to control, what kind of edge you have. Use the opacity pressure, but I like the flow opacity demonstrated. Yeah, I feel like as a paintbrush is more like you. With a light stroke, you should just get the tips of the bristles, while a heavier stroke pushes into the body of the brush. And then I feel like that makes more sense to me. And then it creates like this more kind of chunky, brushy look, but it gives a lot of control as far as edges are concerned. I always wanted that kind of chunky, kind of natural, painty look to my work. And that's why I always avoided that opacity flow brush. But it's really popular. And for some people, it's the way they can naturally control these sorts of things. So give everything a try, and then stick with whatever seems to be giving you the best result, whatever feels easy and natural to you. There's no perfect right answer to this stuff. It really is just a matter of finding what works for us individually. All right. So I'm going to move on. We are deep into the class at this point, running way behind because of technical problems. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great to see your work. Jade, I promised you that I was going to take a look at your work today. Got it here. Is Jade here? Do you want to try connecting, Jade, and see if it works? I have a feeling I'm going to end up with the same connection problems as before. Hey, Jade, how's it going?
Okay. Really glad to have you.
Okay. I think I'm having the same connection issues as I was having with Nano. It really is on my end today. So.
Okay, go right. Writing.
Not really comfortable with close. Never know how to make it well. That's, I pulled out your piece because as I was talking about in the sort of the pre-show, the way I did the close, the way I was approaching it. Let me pull up the reference here so that we have this for the video. Oh my God, there we go. I think that the point you're at right now is like a good starting point. This is an excellent. you've captured a lot of the large folds very well. You've got the big blocks of color in there. I think all you need to do at this point is start to poke holes in it. I think that it's possible to take the piece that you have right now, and if you're willing to let it be a little bit messier, you do have very tightly controlled edges and very organized work. But if you were comfortable punching some holes in it, you could probably find a way to create that texture by just looking at the pattern of these like ovals rather than looking at the string, just looking at the ovals and finding a pattern there and carefully just poking holes in your painting. I think that you could create that sense of texture very naturally this way. And if you're looking at the holes rather than at the strings, then you can see how these holes, some of them get stretched out, they have a directionality to them. And so as long as you're making them in a way that shows off that tension, then you should be able to create that knit look without having to go through and draw everything single thread. The holes are much bigger than the thread, and ultimately I think that they establish the look of the sweater even more so than the thread does. And you may not even need to knock in all of them. And you can see like the amount of contrast on these holes varies quite a bit depending on where we are in this sleeve. Like there's these over here are very dark, while the ones over here are much lower contrast. There's another little pocket of darker ones right here. And so mimicking that and using like a slightly more opaque brush on some patches and using a slightly less opaque brush and maybe slightly thinner strokes on others will give you like, will actually show that the depth of the knit very naturally. And it really isn't too time consuming. When I did this myself, I did it as a final step. I think I spent about 10 minutes adding all the holes on a layer, and that's all it took in order to get like the sense of that. So I thought that your piece was good to pull out as an example of this because you had established the overall like outer shell of the sweater so well, and we're just missing that extra layer of detail in order to pull that together. But I really like that. Tried to use the simple white shape, seeing the glasses, but it didn't work out very well. I should have tried more. I think it actually looks really good. I think the glasses look excellent. You did skip out on the eyes. I think using some of these dark blue colors that you already established in the color palette to paint in the eyes would add a little bit of extra depth, and you would still have that simplicity of color. I really like the darker blue hues that you're using in some of the shadows in addition to the brighter bits. And Sean's calling it out. You did a really nice job on the hands as well. The subtlety on like the place where the finger is poking into the cheek is very nice. I think that the color accents look really good, and like you using the blue in more than one place, I think is really successful in this piece overall. But I think having the glasses be a solid white is actually a good play. I think it just might need to contrast a little bit with some rendering on the lenses. Oh, what Photoshop am I using? I'm using CS6. I'm using an ancient version of Photoshop that you might be able to pirate if you're very curious about it. But great job, Jade. I think the creative choices that you put into color this week are really successful. And I think that if you were to just like get over your discomfort about adding the additional holes, I think you would be able to like achieve the results on the sweater as well. All right. Next up, we've got. Oh, I don't have the username. Oh my god, what happened? I saved out everyone before I rebooted, and I saved them out as PSDs, and I should have had a screenshot of all the users along with their comments. Who am I looking at? I'm looking back through the homework thread to find him. Patrick says, hope everyone's doing well. Here's my weekly submission. All right, let me go back to the chat now. Oh my god. I'm doing everything wrong today. I'm out of the zone. It's me, Patrick. Patrick, if you want to chat, feel free to raise your hand. I can pull you up on... Oh, I guess I can't really pull you up on stage this week. This is the one week where it's not working. But, sorry. I love the gold accent. I really like the mixture of the gray and gold background. Something I noticed at first I was thinking, oh, well, he's done the values totally wrong. And then I realized, like, oh, no, you haven't done the values wrong at all. Like, you've intentionally shifted the values in order to make a color composition that's more original. So, like, the sweater overall is much darker in your version than it is in the reference. But I'm not convinced that that's actually a negative. I think that it feels like a creative choice, and it's creating a value contrast between the sweater and the skin, which are normally occupying a very similar value range. But you've shifted the values to make the skin lighter and the sweater darker in order to give them their own value space. And it's a fair choice to make. I think that flattening areas of value, as well as like shifting them one element lighter, one element darker, in order to give certain ranges of value to different elements, I think it's a totally fair creative choice. In this case, like to my eye, when I look at this piece, I see there's a lot of dynamic range of value in the skin tone from some, we've got like a really different light hitting the hands than we do on the face. So for me, I would have probably aimed to keep more dynamic range on the skin tone where we have a lot of dynamic range, and then flatten the sweater in a way where it contrasted with the skin. So I might have ended up going lighter with the sweater and darker with the skin personally if I was taking the same similar approach. But I love to see that you're taking a swing at the at stylizing the values. And so I wanted to call that out as an interesting choice, and one is difficult to see the gray shades in this one. Yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons why you can make a creative choice on the values is like rather than nail them, you can fudge them a little bit. If you make it into more, if you like use it in a way that like feels like a choice by like darkening the sweater a lot. Then somebody like me is going to look at it and go, hey, it's very interesting that you did that, rather than being like, oh, it's wrong. So feel free to always fall back on that as a crutch if you feel like you're not quite getting the overall dynamic range of the values correctly. Pick and choose where you want to fight your battles. I think that it's always appropriate to pick a portion of the study and invest a lot of your time there, and then play down the other bits, the ones that are catching your eye less or you're less interested in practicing. The place where I think we're getting a little bit of a weird result, I think the eyes and the hands could both use a little bit more of a touch, because our eye is being really drawn to them by the value and color treatment that you're giving here, and the hand being like the forward hand being so prominent in this composition. I think spending an extra like few cycles, whether that means for you a few minutes or an extra hour, to get the structure of the hand feeling natural, getting the gesture of the hand feeling natural, so that you have like the pinky curled in a little tighter, and then, the other fingers kind of unfurling a little bit. So there's this interesting tension where the ring finger is coming down. And I think that getting that gesture to feel just right and getting the hand to attach onto the wrist, this is one place where it's deviating quite a bit from the references. On the reference, the wrist is coming quite a bit more over like this. I think that the palm is also a little longer. And it's just one of those things where, because human beings are so incredibly sensitive to the shapes of hands and faces, that spending some extra time to dial those in is going to do you a lot of good. And then with the eyes as well, you've stylized the values in the eyes quite a bit, but I think that sticking a little bit, they're starting to look kind of like anime eyes in a way that is standing out in a way I'm not sure is fully intentional. You can see in the reference here, we're just not getting quite so much of that white sclera showing through. And it doesn't feel like we need it because they're being hidden behind sunglasses. So getting to take advantage of the compressed values in the sunglasses to keep this all a little smokier and more obscured, I think it would feel really natural in here. What opacity and values do you use on that brush? So opacity and values. So what I'm typically doing at first is I'm just using black and white at different levels of opacity. And then I'm controlling my opacity using the keyboard. So when I press 0, I get up to 100% opacity. I press 1, it goes down to 10% opacity. 5 goes to 50%. And so I'm controlling it by having my left hand on the keyboard and then, raking my hand either left or right on the number keys at the top, choosing, lower when I want to do more blending or higher if I want to focus more on edges. So if I wanted to do a little bit of a dark wash here, I might just do it about 40%. Select the color off the canvas here. And so I'm just selecting, if there's anybody who's still a beginner here, the best way to get exactly the right color or value is to just go ahead and select it straight off the canvas by having your finger on the Alt key. This is something, they've got that, in Procreate, they've only got one button, and it's the eyedropper tool, kind of for a reason. I mean, to me, it's the most critical tool in a digital painting suite, is making sure that the color selection on the brush works really well. So you can easily grab a darker shade if you need to start to darken out an area, or a lighter shade if you need to start knocking in some highlights. And I really don't like having to swap too much between things. So just being able to use the number keys for the opacity and then the Alt key for the color selection is the majority of what I'm doing when I'm working. All right. Thank you so much, Patrick. You did an excellent job this week. Really striking piece. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next one. Got Chris Wolf. Dang, I really wish that the audio wasn't being a problem this week. I'll have everything back in order next week, I guarantee it. Same usual time. Everything's going to be all right. Chris Wolf, I saw you here a minute ago. You're still here. How's it going? See, questions. I tried to limit the value range initially, but I found that I had to expand the range whether I liked it or not in order to capture her character. What do you suggest to fight this? Second question is on the color. I wanted to focus on that question first. So you've got the reference in here. We can rearrange these windows. There we go. So you got your initial value study, and then you got your final here. And you were asking well, how do you compress a value range? But doesn't that screw up the way that things are going to look? I think the answer is no. I think like the uh, tried to limit the value range initially, but found I had to expand the range whether I liked it or not. Yeah, it's like it works sometimes and it doesn't other times. It's really a matter of subjectivity. Trying to get the exact right values from the reference is not necessary. I see that you've changed the reference to black and white and you have it on the canvas with you. You're keeping it very, very close to you. When I typically do these, I keep them side by side, arranged like this, so that I've got the reference on one side and then I've got the canvas that I'm working on the other, rather than keeping the reference on the canvas with me. And part of that is because I want a certain amount of remove from the reference. I want to have to feel like I'm bridging that gap on my own creatively without sampling colors directly from the canvas or having it right next to it, or I mean, like in this case, like right next to it. But like I want to feel like I am having to download the image and digest it and then re-upload it onto the canvas. So I want to make sure that like the values are passing through my own personal interpretation. And that's not something that I'm creating a systematic approach to. It's something that I'm trying to do intuitively. So if you feel like, hey, I'm not getting the values that I want, like the figure's not coming off the background as much as I want, that's fine. You know, experiment with ways that feel like it solves that problem. Like, do you need to fudge the background so that it ends up being darker and causes like the lighter sweater to pop forwards? You can mess with the values quite a bit and get them far away from where the reference is, and as long as they are internally consistent, they tend to look pretty good. I was told to try to limit the value range to like 6 at best, not more. So I was trying to limit. Yeah, I guess. I mean, that's sort of like a more of a philosophical. I would say that's more of a philosophical point than like a technical one. Like in this case, you have a range of values as swatches, and you're trying to use 6 of them. It's like when I think about having a limited number of I think so. When you say value range, this might be a definition of terms that we're getting off on the wrong foot. When I think about like compressing a value range, what I think about is something like this. All right, let me do this as an adjustment layer. Like if I do this, I'm like compressing the value range. Like white only goes up to a certain level, and you can see this in the reference image now too. And I can do this on the lower end as well. You can like clip the value range and get fewer total values by like literally compressing the value range like this. But it looks like what you're talking about is less about compressing the value range and more about having a certain number of like levels of value. So if we were to posterize this, what's the best way to posterize stuff? So if we were to posterize it, we get to choose a number of levels, and you're like, I only want to do 6 levels of value. This is what it looks like when there's 6 levels of value. Versus like, okay, we're going to do 10 and we're going to chop it up even more finely. Versus like 20, or, you know, it's going to become finer and finer divisions of value. And it can be, a lot of people will challenge themselves to use a very limited number of value levels in order to focus on these transitions and figure out where do all these levels kind of sit in the composition. when people talk about like limiting the number of values in a scene for practice, this is typically what they're talking about. And we've done studies in the past that focus specifically on this kind of posterization challenge where you use maybe only like 3 values and try to like make a piece work when you're only using like 3 values. And you can see on the reference here, it is possible to create a very accurate photographic likeness using only 3 values. And it's actually quite an interesting look. So it's an interesting challenge to make. But I would think picking out 6 swatches of value and then trying to stick to those, it's a different kind of challenge than what we're talking about. If you're talking about limiting value range, it really is more about like the picking like things to either be generally lighter or generally darker. Yeah. And like having like 6 swatches and then trying to figure out which of those 6 swatches you're going to be using, that's a very specific kind of challenge. It's not really that necessary. It's something that I would, if you wanted to practice, I would practice it with like a very small number, like 3. That can be an excellent exercise. But for something like this, I think that trying to limit the number of swatches you're selecting isn't really quite so necessary. As I was showing in the previous demonstration, the way that I typically render is about getting, I like sketch out where my values are going to be early on when things are rough. And I try to make sure I get all the lights and darks that I'm going to use over the course of the piece and get the full range of whatever the full range of value is going to be. I'm just expanding the value range a little bit here to show like if I want a full range of values, I will make sure to push that and have that all on the canvas. And then instead of going back and being like, okay, well, which of these swatches am I going to pull for this grayscale image? Once all the stuff's on there, you can just kind of pick from where it is on the canvas. And if you need to like, you know, say push the chin back a little bit, you can just grab one of the darker tones and you can kind of like move yourself around through half steps just by selecting the colors off the canvas. I don't feel like if you're going to be doing a fully rendered piece, I don't think that that's necessarily going to be a hindrance for you. I think it's a lot easier to like render your work when you have the freedom to pull the values straight from the canvas rather than worrying about a sort of pre-selected group of values that you're trying to like pull from. It's one more thing to hold in your mental stack. And human beings, we've just got a very small amount of RAM in our brains. There are so many calculations that we're having to go through in order to make an image as a painting. And trying to add one more complication is a challenge rather than something that is necessarily going to make it easier. So I wouldn't worry about that for digital painting, personally. I think there's certain scenarios where it's like helpful, but I would say you've probably made like this assignment more difficult by trying to do things that way. So I hope that helps. I hope that explanation gives some extra context. Let's see, and then we're gonna move on because we're short on time today. Delia, hey Delia, I would have you pop on here, but everything's broken today. You said too many hours spent. I think 6 to 8. Took me a while to get into the flow. Started with just the values and painted, but shifted myself to limited colors values approach. Feeling a little iffy on the coloring since I used blending modes instead of my usual jumping into color. Interesting. Well, I think that I wouldn't have known that you were outside your comfort zone on the colors without you saying it. I think that the blending modes are creating some very good secondary color things happening here. Like looking at the face, we're seeing a lot of different, very natural feeling shades of this cyan that you've picked out. It doesn't feel like it's doing anything super weird in terms of like blending color over black and white. You're getting a nice set of variation across the values for the color, which is part of the reason I like blending modes, is that you're getting the result out of the blending modes that's intentional. I think that if you're going to work with a single color, it's going to be hard to screw it up. I think where blending modes have gotten you in the past is when you start stacking up a lot of them and they start, and your values start getting all weird and like they start blending in ways that you're not anticipating, and like I've seen you struggle with blending modes in the past. And I don't feel like this is a moment where it's showing through in an awkward way. So I think that if you're going to use a single color overlay like this, or even if you were to work with limited color, 2 or 3 colors as a limited color design, you using blending modes to apply color to a black and white image is a totally viable way of doing it. If there's places where I've got criticisms, it's that, like, you know, in addition to you sometimes having blending modes stack up in an awkward way, there's like some awkwardness to like the values. I know the halftones are looking really good for these more solid blocks of color, but once you start getting into this more painterly bit back here, it feels a little bit like you've got some soft brush. Like even through the halftone pattern, I'm seeing this kind of splotchy soft brush look in the background. And then it's getting some of the same thing with you trying to find some of these smaller individual brush strokes inside the sweater. I think that like when you are sticking to your intuition on these like limited solid blocks of color, everything comes through so clearly. It looks so crisp. And not just because it's got hard edges. Like, you have a really strong intuition for it. You make great choices with that. And then it feels so much less confident in places where I feel like we're seeing this brushiness. It feels almost apologetic. And I don't think you need it. My God, what's going on? So I like this piece quite a bit overall. But I do wish that you had used the same kind of confidence in some of the stripe patterning on the sweater and on the background that you did on like the face and the hands. Your eyes are getting strained if you're staring at this piece. Couldn't figure out the soft brush effect because I didn't use a soft brush. Okay, I don't know what it was, but it looks kind of like, you know, it looks a little blurry and smudgy here, which is weird because you're using halftone and like you've got a lot of hard edges to stuff. So something is like blurring this. And then if you wanted to mess with the colors even further beyond this point, I think selective color might be a good option to play with it. Like if you wanted, like, because you can select cyans in specific, you could play around with slightly different variations on the same color. And in this case, I'm trying to bring up the saturation a little bit because I feel like with the way that you're doing the color here, the saturation is something that you could really emphasize even more. And then if you wanted to, because this is a blending mode, you can also gradate this and decide that you want to do it only in selected parts of the image. So if you wanted to bring the focus extra to the face, even though it feels like you're using only one color, you could use some adjustment layers to push the color in certain spots of the canvas. Might have been Gaussian blur doing something funky. Yeah, Gaussian blur is funky. It's always going to do something funky. I mean, this dark edge around here, this might all be coming from the Gaussian blur. Because Gaussian blur will like do weird stuff to like the edges of the canvas sometimes. It's really annoying. All right. It's great to see your work as always. Thanks for playing along. Amanda, your last one for today. 2-hour study. That's good timing. Originally, I wanted to have the shadows be purple along with the sunglasses and lips, but I was struggling enough with the shirt on its own, so I dialed the color way back. I feel like I committed some cardinal sin of art by not starting with a sketch, but I feel like worked better with jumping straight into forms. But there's a benefit to the sketch as well. I think that's something I need to continue to explore, find out what works for me. Overall fun study. Yeah, the starting with a sketch or not is the point that I wanted to talk about when I was looking through this. I mean, yeah, you could have found more places to put the purple to build up the accent color. I'm confident you could have figured that out. But this sketch thing had me thinking, because I think compared to prior studies, my initial impression was that this is coming out a little bit sketchier and blurrier than usual. You've also constrained yourself on time pretty aggressively, which might be a part of it as well. But I wanted to raise the possibility that when you skip on the sketch, you're not quite finding where your edges are as firmly as you would otherwise. And so I'm looking at places like the hand here. And you've got this hard edge along the back of the hand, which is fine. It's a fine enough choice. But I don't feel like, but you have no hard edges anywhere else on the hand. And to me, it reads oddly. I feel like you need to be picking some distinct places where you want to define like a fold to try to show the expression of the hand a little bit more clearly, or to just create a cleaner separation between the digits, even though they're like, we don't have like a really strong separation between the digits. It might help the overall expression read a little bit more clearly. And finding those edges out of a pool of mushiness is the way that like some people really like to work. And maybe that's where you're headed. And you just ran out of time on discovering these edges. But one of the reasons I like a sketch is because I feel like it's easier to start with things all having a little bit of a firmer edge and then slowly work away from that and like let it get blurrier, let it get mushier as a creative choice. And when everything is all kind of loose and mushy, it's sometimes difficult to make those choices. And then when you do, I always struggle with whenever I keep things really loose at first and then I try to dial it in, I feel like I can never quite find where those cuts need to be. Like, where do those hard lines actually need to get carved in? And so I find that I have a more awkward structure later. So even if I'm able to find and pick out an edge, like some of the edges to contrast with the softer ones, I still find myself like sort of struggling on the structure of things at the end. Trying to skip the structure and the edges until the end of the piece feels like a lot to put on the last step of the process. So that's the point where I have some concerns. Yeah, having a hard time cleaning up a drawing. Yeah, I think you have to do the cleanup where you like figure out where this stuff all is, like have some certainty about where it all lies, either at the beginning or at the end. Like, it's got to happen somewhere. And different people are going to like resolve these questions in different orders. So it's not that you absolutely need to like work out a tight sketch up front, but there is a level of refinement in a sketch early on. I think some people take it too far by trying to make like really precisely inked work right up front. But I find that when I don't have that, it just results in lots of wasted time on the back end, going back and forth, being like, oh, I cut the edge over there, but that one's wrong. Now I need to mush it out again. Now I need to move it a little bit. And then it's like, oh, but wait. The finger's pointing up too much, and it should be pointing like down and over more. And it's like these things affect the gesture of critical bits. And so there's a lot of like cutting in an edge, doing some work, going, oh, no, shit, that was the wrong one. And then like wiping it out and cutting in another edge. And it's just it's tedious. It feels like a lot of wasted work, and it just feels like a huge pain in the ass. Some people, they work blurry to focused and are able to start super blurry and just find where these things are and carve them in late into the process. Maybe you're one of those people. But if you're finding yourself going back and forth a lot at those final steps, I think that taking extra time at the beginning to work out the sketch and then do what you did. I don't have it in front of me, but I looked at your works in progress. I thought they looked very nice. They were building up in a very natural way. You're looking at the big shapes first. That's excellent. But I think that having some tighter structure to like work out the gesture of the hand, figure out where the features are, then kind of mush those broader strokes over the top of it in a way that keeps you from feeling too constrained, but you still know where everything lies. I think there's a balance there. All right. But yeah, Sean's pointing out you got really great values in this piece. I mean, I think that there is definitely something in your experience on this one that is revealing like a way that you want to work, a way that's easy and natural for you. But like, I still think that eschewing the sketch entirely at the beginning, you might be leaving behind something that you're not really going to need until you're wrapping around all the way at the end again. But I think you might be feeling its absence to a degree. All right, and so that leads us right to the end of the hour, right on time. Thanks everyone for joining me. I'd normally be taking questions right now, but I can't take questions because my internet's acting weird in the middle of this storm. I am going to give you the assignment for this week, though. This is the piece for this week. I'm going to upload it to the chat here, and then I'm also going to upload it to the homework channel. The twist for this piece this week is that you can see there's a lot of empty space at the top of this piece. I want you to paint in whatever sky. I want you to paint in some clouds. We're going to do some more clouds. So paint in the sky however you'd like. That's the way I'm phrasing it today. If you want to draw like tons of detailed crumbly clouds, that would be great. If you want to draw huge fluffy clouds, god damn, I love a fluffy cloud. Go for it. Get creative with it. You can draw it out of your head. You could use a reference. I recommend just trying to draw it out of your head. If you're going to draw it out of your head and you're not super, super confident about clouds, my recommendation is that you go on Pinterest, search epic clouds, and then just look at photos of clouds for 10 minutes while you listen to some music or something, and then go and do this assignment. If you load your brain up with images of a thing and then you go to draw it, it fills up your subconscious, and then it kind of dumps out onto the canvas. It's really kind of amazing how effective that can be. So give it a try this week. It just take a little bit of time and just load your subconscious up with cloud imagery, and then draw a little cute house, a couple of quick bushes, and then go to town on the sky and have fun with it. Any questions about the assignment this week? I know I've had some problem assignments in the past. Yeah, downloaded through my Neuralink. That's excellent. You've got one of those. I'm looking forward to getting mine. Actually, I just got new hardware today. I got a Cintiq in. I got it mounted to my desk on the big ass arm, but I didn't get it plugged in. Yeah, download cloud.exe. You can absolutely do a matrix style brain download by looking at a ton of images before you start painting. It works for anything. I discovered this when I was in college, and I realized that all my doodles in art history class were better than all the doodles that I did in every other gen ed class. And I realized it was just because I was looking at all these nude figures. I was better at drawing figures when I just finished looking up at a bunch of really, interesting, dynamic figure paintings. And I was like, wait a minute, can I just look up something whatever and just look at a bunch of images and then put them away and then I'll just draw better at a thing. and I tried it out. And I'm not the first person to discover this, but it totally works. It works for anything. It's one of the techniques that I was advising in my class that I was doing. But I still do this today. If I start struggling with something, I will go and do a download on it first. Yeah. I know Cloud Foo. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. Thanks for putting up with all the technical problems this week. We'll be back at the regular time next week. That is Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern. It's on the calendar. Looking forward to seeing y'all. Have a good night. Goodbye. Bye.